Sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the loudest storm inside them. What happens when bullies mistake silence for weakness and kindness for vulnerability? What unfolds when they push someone too far, not knowing they're awakening a force that has been trained since childhood to defend herself and others? This is the story of Maya Chun, a 17-year-old girl who walked into Lincoln High School with nothing but hope for a fresh start, carrying secrets that would change everything. Behind her gentle smile and soft-spoken nature lay years of rigorous training, countless competitions, and a fighting spirit that had been forged through discipline and determination. The bullies at her new school saw an easy target. They saw someone different, someone alone, someone they could torment without consequence. They had no idea they were about to learn the hardest lesson of their lives, that true strength doesn't announce itself with loud words or aggressive behavior. True strength waits patiently, hoping it never has to reveal itself, but ready to strike like lightning when pushed beyond all limits. What started as cruel jokes and petty harassment would escalate into something far more serious, forcing Maya to make a choice between staying hidden and standing up not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel small and powerless. This is her story, a tale of resilience, courage, and the moment when Maya Chun stood at the entrance of Lincoln High School, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete steps where clusters of students gathered, their voices creating a symphony of teenage chatter that seemed both welcoming and intimidating. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked through the glass doors that would lead her into what she hoped would be a better chapter of her life. The hallways of Lincoln High were wider than those at her previous school, lined with blue lockers that gleamed under fluorescent lights. Students moved in familiar groups, their conversations flowing naturally as they navigated between classes. Maya observed everything with careful eyes, noting the unspoken social hierarchies that existed in every high school she had ever attended. There were the athletes with their Letterman jackets and confident strides, the artists with paint-stained fingers and creative energy, the academic achievers carrying stacks of books, and the social influencers who seemed to command attention wherever they went. Maya fit into none of these obvious categories, and she preferred it that way. She had learned long ago that blending into the background often meant avoiding unnecessary drama and conflict. Her previous schools had taught her that being noticed sometimes brought the wrong kind of attention, especially when you were one of the few students who looked different from the majority. At 17, she had already attended 4 different high schools due to her father's military career, and each transition had required her to adapt quickly while maintaining her sense of self. Her first period was advanced biology, a class she had specifically requested because science had always been her refuge. Numbers and formulas didn't judge you based on your appearance or background, and laboratory experiments provided clear, logical outcomes that made sense in a world that often didn't. She found the classroom easily and chose a seat in the 3rd row, close enough to show engagement, but far enough back to avoid unwanted attention. Mrs. Patterson, the biology teacher, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an enthusiasm for cellular structure that was both endearing and infectious. As she began explaining the semester's curriculum, Maya felt herself relaxing for the first time since arriving at Lincoln High. This was familiar territory, challenging coursework, scientific concepts, and the comfortable rhythm of academic learning. During the lesson about protein synthesis, Maya noticed a girl sitting 2 seats away who kept glancing in her direction. The girl had curly red hair and freckles scattered across her cheeks like tiny constellations. When their eyes met, the girl smiled warmly and gave a small wave. Maya returned the gesture with a cautious but genuine smile of her own, thinking that perhaps making friends here might not be as difficult as she had anticipated. The bell rang, signaling the end of first period, and students began gathering their belongings with the practiced efficiency of seasoned high schoolers. Maya was organizing her notes when the red-haired girl approached her desk with an expression of friendly curiosity. "I'm Jessica, but everyone calls me Jess," she said, extending her hand in a gesture that seemed both formal and welcoming. "You're new here, right? I haven't seen you before, and I pretty much know everyone in our grade. Maya shook her hand, appreciating the direct approach. Maya. My family just moved here from Colorado Springs. My dad got stationed at the base here, so we packed up everything and started over again. Military family? Jess asked with understanding in her voice. That must be tough, moving around so much. But you're going to love it here. Lincoln High has its drama like any school, but most people are pretty decent once you get to know them. They walked together toward the hallway, and Maya found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Jess had an easy way of talking that didn't require much effort to maintain, and she seemed genuinely interested in helping Maya navigate her new environment rather than just satisfying her own curiosity. What's your next class? Jess asked, glancing at the schedule in Maya's hand. World History with Mr. Rodriguez, Maya replied, checking the room number against the school map she had received during registration. Perfect. I have Spanish right next door. I'll walk you over and show you where the best lunch spots are on the way. Fair warning though, avoid the pizza on Wednesdays. Nobody knows why it tastes different that day, but it's become like an unspoken rule. Maya laughed, feeling more comfortable than she had in weeks. Perhaps this transition would be different from the others. Perhaps she could actually put down roots here, make lasting friendships, and focus on her studies without the constant anxiety of being the perpetual outsider. World history turned out to be equally promising. Mr. Rodriguez was a dynamic teacher who made ancient civilizations come alive through passionate storytelling and interactive discussions. Maya found herself actively participating in a debate about the fall of Rome, sharing insights she had gained from her extensive reading on the subject. Several classmates nodded appreciatively at her contributions, and she began to feel like she might actually belong here. Lunch period arrived with its usual chaos of crowded hallways and rushing students. Jess had invited Maya to sit with her group of friends, a diverse collection of students who seemed to share a love of academic achievement mixed with genuine kindness. There was Marcus, a tall basketball player who was also president of the debate team. Sarah, a quiet artist whose sketchbook was filled with incredibly detailed drawings. And David, a theater enthusiast who could quote Shakespeare as easily as he could discuss the latest movie releases. Maya settled into their conversation naturally, contributing thoughts about environmental science when the topic arose, and listening with interest as they discussed upcoming school events. For the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The cafeteria was typical of most high schools, round tables arranged in loose clusters, with different social groups claiming their traditional territories. Maya noticed the athletes dominating the tables near the windows, their voices carrying easily across the room as they discussed weekend games and practice schedules. The academic clubs had claimed the quieter section near the library entrance, while the more socially oriented students occupied the central area where they could see and be seen by everyone. As Maya was laughing at one of David's theatrical interpretations of their English teacher, she became aware of a group of students at a nearby table whose conversation had shifted in her direction. There were 4 of them, 3 girls and 1 boy, and something in their body language suggested they were discussing her specifically rather than just engaging in casual observation. The apparent leader of the group was a blonde girl named Brittany, whom Maya recognized from her morning biology class. Brittany had the kind of confident beauty that came with knowing she was considered attractive and popular, and she carried herself with the assurance of someone who was accustomed to being the center of attention. Beside her sat 2 other girls who seemed to mirror her expressions and gestures like well-trained backup dancers, and a boy who looked like he spent considerable time in the gym, but considerably less time developing his personality. Maya tried to ignore their stares and focus on her new friend's conversation, but she could feel the weight of their attention like a physical presence. She had experienced this before at other schools, the initial curiosity that sometimes turned into something less pleasant when certain students decided that someone different represented a threat to their established social order. Don't worry about them, Jess said quietly, having noticed Maya's discomfort. Brittany and her crew like to think they run the social scene here, but most people just ignore them. They're more bark than bite. Maya nodded, hoping Jess was right, but feeling a familiar knot forming in her stomach. She had learned to recognize the signs of potential trouble, and Something about the way Brittany was looking at her suggested that her peaceful introduction to Lincoln High might be shorter than she had hoped. The rest of lunch passed without incident, and Maya's afternoon classes continued to reinforce her positive first impression of the school. Her teachers seemed competent and caring, her classmates appeared friendly and inclusive, and the academic standards were appropriately challenging without being overwhelming. By the time the final bell rang, she felt cautiously optimistic about her decision to approach this new beginning with an open mind and a willingness to invest in building lasting relationships. As she gathered her books from her locker and prepared to walk to the bus stop, Maya reflected on the day's events. The morning's nervousness had been replaced by genuine excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead. She had already made one solid friendship with Jess, connected with several interesting classmates, and discovered that Lincoln High offered academic opportunities that aligned perfectly with her goals and interests. Walking toward the school's main exit, Maya noticed Brittany and her friends congregating near the front steps, their voices carrying easily in the afternoon air. As she approached, their conversation seemed to pause, and she felt their eyes following her progress. She maintained her steady pace and neutral expression, hoping to pass by without incident. "Excuse me," Brittany called out, her voice carrying a sweetness that somehow managed to sound more threatening than welcoming. "You're the new girl, right?" Maya stopped and turned toward the group, maintaining polite composure despite the warning bells going off in her head. "Yes, that's right. I started here today. Where did you move from?" Brittany asked, though her tone suggested she was less interested in the answer than in establishing some kind of social dominance through the interaction. "Colorado Springs," Maya replied simply, seeing no reason to elaborate on details that were none of their business. "Interesting," Brittany said, exchanging glances with her friends that seemed to communicate something Maya couldn't interpret. "Well, welcome to Lincoln High. I hope you find everything here to be educational." There was something in the way she emphasized the last word that made Maya's skin crawl, but she simply nodded politely and continued toward the exit. As she walked away, she could hear their laughter following her, though she couldn't make out the words of their continued conversation. The bus ride home gave Maya time to process the day's experiences and consider how she wanted to approach the coming weeks. Overall, her first day had been far more positive than negative, and she wasn't going to let one uncomfortable interaction overshadow the genuine connections she had made with Jess and the others. She had dealt with bullies before, and she knew that sometimes the best strategy was simply to avoid giving them the reaction they were seeking. Her family's new house was a modest ranch-style home in a quiet Neeg. Maya's second day at Lincoln High began with the same cautious optimism that had carried her through the previous afternoon and evening. She arrived at school 15 minutes early, hoping to use the extra time to familiarize herself with the building layout and perhaps review her notes before first period began. The hallways were quieter at this hour, populated mainly by dedicated athletes heading to early morning practice and ambitious students seeking extra help from their teachers. She was organizing her locker when she heard familiar voices approaching from behind. Turning slightly, she saw Jess walking toward her with Marcus and Sarah, their conversation animated and welcoming. Maya felt a surge of gratitude for their apparent willingness to include her in their established friendship group so readily. "Maya," Jess called out with genuine enthusiasm. "Perfect timing. We were just talking about the Environmental Science Club meeting after school today. You mentioned yesterday that you're interested in climate research, and we thought you might want to check it out." "That sounds amazing," Maya replied, closing her locker and joining their small circle. "I've been involved in similar clubs at my previous schools, and I'd love to continue that here." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Dr. Williams is the faculty sponsor, and she's incredible. She actually has connections with research labs at the university, so sometimes club members get opportunities to participate in real studies. Last semester, 3 seniors got internships through her recommendations." As they walked toward the biology classroom, Maya found herself feeling increasingly confident about her decision to approach Lincoln High with an open mind. These students weren't just academically driven. They seemed genuinely interested in making a positive impact on their community and the world beyond their school walls. This was exactly the kind of environment where Maya thrived. Biology class proceeded smoothly, with Mrs. Patterson building on the previous day's lesson about protein synthesis by introducing concepts of genetic expression and cellular regulation. Maya participated actively in the discussion, sharing insights from her extensive independent reading on CRISPR technology and gene therapy. Several classmates, including Jess, seemed genuinely impressed by her knowledge, and Mrs. Patterson made a point of encouraging her to consider entering the upcoming regional science fair. The trouble began during the transition between second and third periods. Maya was walking alone toward her world history class when she became aware of footsteps following closely behind her. She initially assumed it was simply the normal flow of student traffic, but when she slowed her pace to allow faster walkers to pass, the footsteps slowed as well. A cold feeling began to settle in her stomach as she recognized the pattern of behavior she had encountered before at other schools. "Hey, new girl," a voice called out, and Maya turned to see Brittany approaching with her usual entourage in tow. The blonde girl's expression was friendly enough on the surface, but Maya had learned to look deeper than surface appearances when evaluating potential threats. "Good morning, Brittany," Maya replied politely, hoping to keep the interaction brief and neutral. "I was thinking about our conversation yesterday," Brittany continued, falling into step beside Maya as they walked. "You said you moved here from Colorado Springs, right? That's interesting, because I have a cousin who lives there, and she was telling me some really fascinating stories about the schools in that area." Maya felt the warning bells in her head growing louder, but she maintained her composure. "It's a nice area. The schools there are pretty good academically." "Oh, I'm sure they are," Brittany said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But my cousin was telling me about some of the social dynamics there. Apparently, there are some schools where certain types of students have trouble fitting in. You know, students who are different." The word different hung in the air like a challenge, and Maya felt her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She had heard this tone before, had experienced this type of coded language that allowed bullies to express their prejudices while maintaining plausible deniability if confronted by authority figures. "I think every school has its social challenges," Maya replied evenly. "Most problems can be avoided by focusing on academics and treating everyone with respect." "Absolutely," Brittany agreed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Respect is so important. Like, for instance, respecting the established social order and understanding where you fit in before trying to change things or make waves." They had reached Maya's classroom, and she felt relief wash over her as she prepared to escape this increasingly uncomfortable conversation. "Well, this is my stop. I'll see you around." "Of course you will," Brittany said sweetly. "Lincoln High isn't that big. We'll definitely be seeing a lot of each other." Maya entered the world history classroom feeling shaken, but determined not to let Brittany's veiled threats overshadow her academic goals. Mr. Rodriguez was writing discussion questions on the whiteboard, and Maya took her usual seat while trying to focus her attention on the upcoming lesson about the Industrial Revolution. The class proceeded normally, with Maya participating in the discussion about the social impacts of technological change. She found herself drawing parallels between historical patterns of resistance to change and the social dynamics she was observing at Lincoln High, though she kept these observations to herself. Lunch period arrived with its familiar chaos, and Maya joined Jess and the others at their usual table. She debated whether to mention her encounter with Brittany, ultimately deciding that making a big deal about veiled threats might create more drama than simply ignoring them entirely. "You seem a little quiet today," Sarah observed as Maya picked at her sandwich. "Everything okay?" "Just adjusting to the new routine," Maya replied, which was truthful enough without being unnecessarily dramatic. "It takes me a few days to feel completely comfortable in a new environment." "That's totally understandable," David said with his characteristic theatrical flair. "Change is like a stage production. There's always a period of rehearsal before everything feels natural and authentic." Maya smiled at his analogy, appreciating his ability to find creative metaphors for ordinary experiences. She was about to respond when she noticed Brittany and her friends approaching their table with expressions that suggested this wasn't a casual social visit. "Mind if we join you for a few minutes?" Brittany asked, though she was already pulling out a chair before anyone could respond. "I wanted to continue my conversation with Maya about her previous school experiences." Maya felt tension radiating from her new friends as they exchanged subtle glances that communicated their shared discomfort with this intrusion. Jess, in particular, seemed to be preparing herself for conflict, her usually relaxed posture becoming more alert and defensive. I was just telling Maya about my cousin who lives in Colorado Springs. Brittany continued, settling into her chair with the confidence of someone who was accustomed to commanding attention. Apparently, the schools there have some really interesting diversity initiatives. Programs designed to help students from different backgrounds integrate more successfully. Maya felt her patience beginning to wear thin, but she maintained her neutral expression. Many schools have programs like that. They're usually focused on academic support and cultural awareness. Exactly, Brittany exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. Cultural awareness is so important. Like understanding how different communities approach conflict resolution, for instance. Some cultures are more passive in their approach to problems, while others are more direct. The implication was clear, and Maya felt anger beginning to simmer beneath her carefully controlled surface. Brittany was attempting to stereotype her as someone who would avoid confrontation, presumably based on assumptions about her racial background. This type of coded racism was more insidious than direct slurs because it allowed the perpetrator to maintain plausible deniability while still delivering their intended message of intimidation. I think effective conflict resolution depends more on individual personality and circumstances than cultural background, Maya replied calmly. Most intelligent people adapt their approach based on the specific situation they're facing. Of course, Brittany agreed with a patronizing smile. Though sometimes people think they understand a situation better than they actually do. Like when someone new arrives somewhere and assumes they can just blend in without learning the local customs and social expectations. Jess had apparently heard enough. "What exactly are you trying to say, Brittany?" she asked with barely contained irritation. "Nothing negative at all," Brittany replied with mock innocence. "I'm just trying to help Maya understand how things work here. For instance, some students have been here since elementary school and have established relationships and reputations that took years to build. It would be unfortunate if someone new came in and accidentally disrupted those relationships by not understanding the social dynamics." Maya felt her friend's anger on her behalf, but she also recognized that reacting emotionally would give Brittany exactly what she wanted, an excuse to escalate the situation and potentially portray Maya as unstable or aggressive. Instead, she chose to respond with the same level of superficial politeness that Brittany was using to mask her hostility. "Thank you for the advice," Maya said with a smile that matched Brittany's in its artificial sweetness. "I'll certainly keep it in mind as I continue to meet people and form my own opinions about the social dynamics here." Something in Maya's tone seemed to catch Brittany off guard, as if she had expected a different type of response. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across the blonde girl's face before she recovered her composure. "Well," Brittany said, standing up with her characteristic dramatic flair, "I'm glad we had this chat. I think we understand each other much better now." After Brittany and her friends departed, Maya's table remained silent for several moments as everyone processed what had just occurred. Finally, Marcus spoke up with obvious frustration. "That was completely out of line," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She basically just threatened you while pretending to be helpful." "It's fine," Maya replied, though she was still feeling the effects of adrenaline from maintaining her composure during the confrontation. "I've dealt with people like that before." "It's not fine," Jess said firmly. "Nobody should have to deal with that kind of coded harassment on their second day at a new school." Brittany thinks she can intimidate anyone she perceives as a threat to her social status. Sarah nodded in agreement. "She's been like this since middle school. Most people just avoid her because it's easier than dealing with the drama, but that doesn't make her behavior acceptable." Maya appreciated their outrage on her behalf, but she also knew that making this into a larger conflict would likely create more problems than it would solve. She had learned through experience that bullies often thrived on attention and drama, and the best strategy was sometimes to refuse to give them the reaction they were seeking. "I understand why you're upset," Maya said carefully, "but I think the best approach right now is to just focus on our own friendships and activities. If I ignore her attempts to provoke me, she'll probably lose interest and move on to someone else." Even as she said the words, Maya suspected they weren't entirely true. Something about Brittany's behavior suggested this was more than casual bullying. It felt personal and targeted in a way that indicated sustained attention rather than passing interest. The rest of lunch passed without further incident, and Maya's afternoon classes proceeded normally. However, she found herself increasingly aware of Brittany's presence throughout the day. The blonde girl seemed to appear in Maya's peripheral vision with suspicious frequency, always accompanied by her friends, and always wearing that same artificially sweet smile that somehow managed to feel more threatening than an open scowl. After school, Maya attended the environmental science club meeting that Jess had recommended. Dr. Williams turned out to be everything Marcus had promised, an enthusiastic educator with genuine expertise and impressive connections to the scientific community. The club members were discussing plans for a water quality testing project in local streams, and Maya found herself genuinely excited about the possibility of contributing to meaningful environmental research. As the meeting concluded and students began gathering their belongings, Dr. Williams approached Maya with a welcoming smile. "Jess told me you might be interested in joining our group," she said. "I looked over the transcript you submitted during registration, and your background in environmental science is quite impressive. Have you given any thought to what you might want to study in college?" Maya felt a surge of pride at the recognition of her academic achievements. "I'm considering environmental engineering or marine biology. I'm particularly interested in the intersection between technological solutions and ecosystem preservation." "Excellent," Dr. Williams replied enthusiastically. "We're actually starting a new project next month in collaboration with the university's marine science department. They're studying microplastic contamination in coastal waters, and they've agreed to let some of our advanced students participate in data collection and analysis. Would you be interested in applying for one of those positions?" Maya's excitement was genuine and immediate. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had hoped to find at Lincoln High, a chance to engage in real research that could make a difference while building the academic credentials she would need for college applications. "I would absolutely be interested," she replied. "What would the application process involve?" Dr. Williams explained the requirements and timeline, and Maya left the meeting feeling energized about her academic prospects. As she walked toward the bus stop, she reflected on how dramatically her day had contrasted between positive and negative experiences. The confrontation with Brittany had been unpleasant, but the opportunities represented by her new friendships and academic involvement far outweighed the social drama. She was nearly to the bus stop when she heard footsteps approaching rapidly from behind. Turning, she saw Brittany's boyfriend Jake jogging to catch up with her, his expression serious in a way that immediately put Maya on alert. "Hey, Maya," he called out, slowing to a walk as he reached her. "I wanted to talk to you for a minute." Maya stopped, but positioned herself near other students who were waiting for their buses, instinctively seeking the safety of witnesses. "What about?" "Look," Jake said, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed genuinely nervous. "I know Brittany can come across as intense sometimes, but she's not actually a bad person. She's just protective of her friends and her position here, you know?" Maya studied his face, trying to determine whether this was a genuine attempt at peacemaking or another form of psychological manipulation. "I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me," she said carefully. "But I'm not sure what you want me to do with that information. I just think maybe you could try to understand where she's coming from," Jake continued. "She's been the unofficial social coordinator for our class since freshman year. People look up to her, and sometimes when someone new comes in with strong opinions and academic achievements, it can feel threatening to her." Maya felt her temper beginning to rise, but she kept her voice level. "I'm not trying to threaten anyone. I'm just trying to attend classes, make friends, and focus on my education." "I know that," Jake said quickly, "and I think deep down, Brittany knows that too. But maybe if you could just tone things down a little, like maybe don't participate quite so actively in class discussions, or don't volunteer for leadership positions in clubs right away. Give her some time to get used to having you around." Maya stared at him in disbelief. He was essentially asking her to make herself smaller, to hide her intelligence and ambitions, in order to avoid threatening a girl who had already demonstrated clear hostility toward her for no legitimate reason. "Let me make sure I understand what you're asking," Maya said slowly. You want me to pretend to be less intelligent and less motivated than I actually am, so that Brittany won't feel insecure about my presence at this school? Jake shifted uncomfortably, apparently realizing how his request sounded when stated so directly. I'm just trying to help you avoid unnecessary conflict. Brittany has a lot of influence here, and if she decides to make your life difficult, she has the social connections to do it. And what happens if I refuse to make myself smaller to accommodate her insecurities? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Jake's expression hardened slightly, revealing a glimpse of the person beneath his superficially reasonable exterior. I hope it doesn't come to that, he said. For your sake. The threat was clear, and Maya felt her carefully controlled anger finally beginning to show on her face. Thank you for the warning, she said with ice in her voice. I'll certainly keep it in mind. Jake nodded, apparently satisfied that he had delivered the next 2 weeks at Lincoln High passed in a state of increasing tension that reminded Maya of the calm before a hurricane. Brittany's campaign of harassment had evolved from direct confrontation to a more sophisticated form of psychological warfare that was harder to report, but no less damaging to Maya's daily experience. It began with small things that could easily be dismissed as coincidence or misunderstanding. Maya's textbooks would mysteriously disappear from her locker between classes, only to be found later in random locations around the school. Her homework assignments, carefully completed the night before, would vanish from her backpack during lunch, forcing her to hastily recreate them or face the consequences of appearing unprepared in front of her teachers. The social isolation tactics were more subtle but equally effective. Conversations would stop abruptly when Maya approached groups of students in hallways or the cafeteria. Project partners for group assignments would suddenly become unavailable, leaving Maya to complete collaborative work alone. Invitations to social events that had been extended enthusiastically would be quietly rescinded with vague excuses about limited space or changed plans. Maya recognized the strategy immediately. Brittany was using her social influence to create a network of exclusion around Maya without ever having to directly confront her again. It was a sophisticated form of bullying that was difficult to prove and even harder to combat through traditional channels like teacher intervention or administrative complaints. The psychological impact was exactly what Brittany intended. Maya found herself second-guessing every interaction, wondering which students were genuine friends and which were simply avoiding conflict with Brittany by pretending to be friendly while actually working to isolate her. The uncertainty was almost worse than direct hostility would have been. Jess, Marcus, Sarah, and David remained loyal friends, but Maya could see the strain that defending her was placing on their own social relationships. They were being forced to choose between supporting her and maintaining their standing within the broader student body, and Maya hated that her presence was creating problems for people who had shown her nothing but kindness. You don't have to keep sitting with me at lunch, Maya told Jess one afternoon as they walked to their lockers together. I can see that Brittany is making things difficult for all of you because of your association with me. Jess stopped walking and turned to face Maya with an expression of fierce determination. Are you seriously suggesting that we abandon you because some insecure mean girl is trying to manipulate the social dynamics of our lunch table? Do you really think we're that shallow? I think you're good people who shouldn't have to deal with unnecessary drama because of my problems, Maya replied honestly. Your problems? Jess's voice rose slightly with indignation. You didn't create this situation. You showed up here, message effectively. I hope you make the right choice, Maya. Lincoln High can be a really great place for students who understand how to fit in. As he walked away, Maya stood alone at the bus stop, processing what had just occurred. In less than 48 hours, she had gone from cautious optimism about her new school to receiving direct threats from students who saw her very existence as some kind of challenge to their established social order. The bus arrived, and Maya found a seat near the back where she could think without interruption. As familiar neighborhoods passed by the window, she considered her options. She could try to follow Jake's advice and make herself smaller, hide her intelligence, and avoid drawing attention. She could ask her parents to transfer her to a different school, though explaining the reasoning would be difficult and would likely result in unwanted intervention from adults who didn't understand the subtle nature of social warfare among teenagers. Or she could stand her ground, refuse to be intimidated, and deal with whatever consequences Brittany and her friends decided to impose. Maya had been in this position before, though never quite this early in a school year. She knew from experience that backing down rarely made bullies lose interest. It usually just emboldened them to push further. And she had worked too hard on her academic goals to sacrifice them for the sake of social peace with people whose approval she neither wanted nor needed. By the time the bus reached her stop, Maya had made her decision. She would not make herself smaller to accommodate other people's insecurities. She would continue to participate actively in her classes, pursue leadership opportunities in clubs that interested her, and build genuine friendships with people who appreciated her for who she actually was. If Brittany and her friends wanted a conflict, Maya would not go looking for one. But she would not run away from one either. She had skills and resources that they knew nothing about, and if they pushed her too far, they were going to discover that their assumptions about her passivity were completely and dangerously wrong. The storm was beginning, and Maya was ready to weather whatever came next. Borhood, about 15 minutes from the school. Her parents had chosen it specifically because of its proximity to both the military base where her father worked and Lincoln High, hoping to provide Maya with stability during her final 2 years of high school. As she walked up the driveway, Maya felt grateful for their efforts to make this transition as smooth as possible. "How was your first day, sweetheart?" her mother asked as Maya entered the kitchen where the aroma of home-cooked dinner was already beginning to fill the air. "Actually, it was pretty good," Maya replied, realizing as she said it that this was genuinely true. "I made some new friends, and my classes seem really interesting. The teachers appear to care about actually teaching, which is always a good sign." Her mother smiled with visible relief. Maya's previous school transitions hadn't always gone this smoothly, and everyone in the family had been hoping that Lincoln High would be different. "That's wonderful to hear. Your father will be so pleased when he gets home from work." Maya spent the evening completing her first round of homework assignments and reviewing the material she would need for tomorrow's classes. As she organized her backpack and laid out clothes for the next day, she found herself looking forward to seeing Jess again and continuing to build the friendships that had begun to form during her first day. She fell asleep that night feeling more optimistic about her future than she had in months, completely unaware that Brittany and her friends were already making plans that would test everything she thought she knew about fitting in and standing up for herself. Sometimes the most important battles begin with the smallest provocations, and Maya was about to discover that her peaceful introduction to Lincoln High was merely the calm before a storm that would change everything she thought she understood about strength, courage, and the price of refusing to be anyone other than exactly who she was meant to be. The hunted becomes the hunter.